a jumble of difficult to understand philosophies, but they all ask the same question: what is reality? The two main philosophies in metaphysics are materialism and idealism. Materialism is the concept that everything in reality is a physical material, that there is nothing imaginary, and there is nothing make-believe. Idealism is the exact opposite, which says that everything in reality is a manifestation of ideas, that there are no physical objects. Coupled with materialism is determinism, which is the cause and effect chain, saying that everything in reality can be determined as to what will happen next. Free will is what we prefer to believe in as Western thinking people, which says that there is nothing that is predetermined, that each decision that we make is the decision that we make then and now. Now, materialism and idealism exist on a spectrum, which says that there can be any point between the two. I see it as a rainbow, and you can choose any point on the rainbow that doesn't have to be one of the stark opposites. One of those in-between points is Eastern philosophy, specifically Buddhism and Hinduism. Eastern philosophy has the concept that everything in reality is interconnected in a web of sorts. Everything that is in reality is interconnected with every other thing in reality. If we look at the subatomic level of our reality, we can see that if we separate two particles of an atom by a vast distance, let's say on either sides of the world, and we manipulate one particle in one way, then the other particle moves in the exact same way and the exact same time. These particles obviously have to be connected in some way in order for them to both move at the same time in the same way, even though they're separated by a huge distance. Subatomic interconnectedness is at the subatomic level, which is just smaller pieces of our reality. So if it's just smaller pieces of our reality, then it has to exist in our reality as well. Therefore, everything is interconnected. Self-determinism is kind of debunking determinism. If we look at the cause and effect chain of determinism, which is associated with materialism, then it's important to look back upon the first cause, the uncaused cause, as we say in philosophy class. This uncaused cause is sometimes thought to be God, but for God to exist and cause himself, he has to have already existed, and that's impossible when we're talking about determinism. Instead, self-determinism is saying that each individual, each object has the ability to determine their own fate. Though we talked about how particles act differently when they're on either sides of the globe, but if we look at the double slit experiment as well, when the particles were going through the slits and projected on the wall, the pattern in which they created on the wall was different, just based off of the presence of an observer. If particles at those small tiny pieces are able to act differently based on an observer, and that being the only change, then obviously humans are able to act differently depending on whatever they would like. A big part of the Eastern philosophies is enlightenment. With enlightenment, it is, when a person becomes enlightened, it is when they are able to see reality as it truly is, instead of it being a distorted version that humans see on a day-to-day basis. In Buddhism, when a person becomes enlightened, they become a Buddha, and then it's their responsibility to share their wisdom with the rest of the society. When a person becomes enlightened, their reincarnation cycle is stopped, and that is their last lifetime. And at the end of that lifetime, they reach nirvana, which is similar but very different from Christian heaven. Now, speaking of Christianity, it's important to mention that Buddhism came from Hinduism in the same way that Christianity came from Judaism, with them both being very similar but still having distinct differences. The first philosophy of Hinduism has the same philosophy of it being an interconnected whole, but that there's a central point to that interconnected whole, which is where the gods exist. In that central point, all people and everything is judged equally, and that is why that part is important is because we live unequal lives on Earth. They believe in hundreds of gods, so they're polytheistic, but they still have the same process of reincarnation, enlightenment, and then the end of the lifespan being nirvana. Buddhism is very similar, but they do not believe in the central point of the web. Instead, they believe in the interconnected whole, with nirvana being a part of that same whole instead of being a central part. There's no distinction between nirvana being any more special than any other part of the reality. Again, Buddhism believes the same process of reincarnation, enlightenment, which is becoming a Buddha, and then nirvana, ending that lifespan. Now, karma is extremely important with the Eastern philosophies. There's positive and negative karma. This picture illustrates what karma suggests perfectly. If you start at one point and then work your way around, following the pathway, you'll see that it comes back to the same point. That says that if you put positive energy into your society, into the world, then eventually that positive energy will come back to you. And it's the same with negative. Negative karma, if you put it into the world, it can eventually come back to you. With more positive energy, you're able to get more closer to nirvana instead of farther away, which is what happens when you put negative energy. Negative energy can come back to you in your future lifetimes as well, which is where demotion comes in. A person can actually be demoted from human status and go from being a human to being a dog or even algae on the side of a building. Eastern metaphysics is definitely very difficult to understand. There is the philosophies of both Buddhism and Hinduism, and each has their own distinct individuality. Buddhism and Hinduism give a comprehensive answer to the question of what is reality, and they're able to give a whole picture to that question without any missing parts. And they're also able to provide a solution to the problem in materialism, which is the original uncaused cause. With Eastern metaphysics, it also can appeal to both people that believe in God and people that do not, with the two different religions. Therefore, I believe that Eastern metaphysics is far superior to materialism. Thank you.